Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I am very excited for this conversation we're about to have today because I know a lot of you out there are either already powerful leaders or you're on the road to claiming, owning, and acknowledging the leader that you truly are. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. And we have an expert in leadership here with us today. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Massimo Backus, by trade and training, is a master facilitator, speaker, and leadership coach. He helps leaders uncover who they are, who they want to be, and learn to transform old habits and patterns that hold them back. They learn to lead with self-awareness and self-management that drives discovery, growth, and success. By combining a deep curiosity and expertise in organizational behavior psychology and team dynamics, Massimo cultivates increased emotional intelligence and agility with the ability to hold multiple perspectives. His coaching combines assessment, skill development, deliberate practice, accountability, and organizational systems thinking to create behavior change that sticks. Welcome to the show, Massimo.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, happy to have you here. So I always like to ask this question at the beginning because I know that often the road to leadership and entrepreneurship in general is often a winding one. So what's it been like for you sort of discovering and stepping into the role that you do now?
It is definitely winding. That's a great way to describe it. There is no straight path. I started my business about a year and a half ago. So in the middle of this fantastic pandemic that we've all been able to partake in. And that was already full of so much uncertainty. So to start your own business and step out as an entrepreneur, it almost seems strangely appropriate to just add more complexity into the dynamic. But it's been amazing. I think, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned the hard way is the value of trusting yourself. And the times that I have gone astray or the times that I regret throughout my life, they're times that I didn't trust myself. And so starting this business has definitely been a journey in trusting myself, and it's been really good so far.
Awesome. So tell us, what does leadership mean to you?
I think that everyone in life has the capacity and the potential to be a leader. I don't think it's defined by role. I don't think it's defined by the level you have or how much money you make or how many degrees or accolades you've earned along the way. I think it's about living with integrity, living with purpose, and living in service of something that is greater than yourself. And so long as you're doing that, I believe that people find themselves in leadership, in the path of leadership, I suppose. And they find people that want to follow them either directly or indirectly. I mean, someone could follow another person just based on being inspired by the way they live. And that in itself is leadership.
Yeah, I love that. I love the permission inside of that too, because it's like you don't have to necessarily even have a message or be broadcasting something specific, but to live your life in integrity and to walk through the world that way. You are a leader. You are guiding others to see that life can be that way, that you can actually stick to your values and have, presence about you that others want to be more of themselves. So by setting that example, you are a leader in and of itself. That sort of opens the door, I think, too, for a lot of people who might be listening who are like afraid to claim that they're a leader in the world, that it might be a lot simpler to own that than you think.
I would imagine, Molly, in the way that you live your life, the way that you lead your life in accordance with your values, that there are people that you intentionally impact, and there are many other people that are impacted by osmosis or by, third degrees of, their connection to you. And that in itself is leadership. I mean, we can see it from a distance when we see somebody that is living the way that they want to live and that is in service of others. Like it is visible. It's behavioral and it's visible. And I think that, you're a perfect example of it.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. I was actually just thinking about that this morning, that I get messages from people saying, you're an inspiration. And there are people that aren't business contacts. They're people that are not necessarily close inner circle kinds of friends of mine. And I have to like acknowledge that, yeah, living my life. And this is not just me saying this about me. This is me saying this about anybody who's listening, who's walking their path unashamedly, like chasing and like aligning with the laws of their own nature, that there's an impact to that. There's a ripple effect to that, that it's really nice to be able to acknowledge. And of course, it's nice when people give you that feedback and you get to sit and acknowledge it. But
yeah. I mean, it must feel great to hear that. But if you woke up every day and thought to yourself, I'm going to be inspirational today.
Right. It's
that's a very different kind of energy than if you're like, I'm just going to do my best and be my best and live my best life and make sure that I'm giving and I'm service of others. And inspiration is a byproduct.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the kind of inspiration I like.
And it's easier to focus on that than to think, I want to make an impact. What can I be or do today to make sure that I'm inspirational? And I think you have more sort of credentials under your belt to support that awareness. So will you tell us a little bit in your point of view? I mean, we talked about alignment, we talked about being in integrity, but if somebody's already in the role of leader, say they're running a business or they're working on a team in a corporate environment, what are some ways to up level or to step into that role of leadership better?
I find that we get lost in our path to, quote, leadership, to leadership positions, to positions of authority, to positions of power, to positions where we make more money and have more influence, that we lose sight of where we come from, that we lose sight of what's most important to us. And it becomes, we're chasing something external and we lose touch with like that internal source of wisdom and internal source of power. And what that is our humanity. And so when I talk to leaders and they're like, I'm trying to figure out how to shift to the next gear, and they're looking all around them. How do I do all these things? I'm like, 10 times out of 10, the shift you need to make is an internal shift. Either the stories you tell yourself need to change, the perspectives you have on the world, your limiting beliefs, your fears, your assumptions, any of these things are likely limiting you. And they had likely got you to where you are. So it's not, you think about in coaching context, oftentimes you think about someone's like inner critic. An inner critic is not bad. An inner critic exists to protect you. Like it comes from a well-intentioned place, although the experience of it does not feel well-intentioned. And so that's part of that inner work, is to recognize, what is the inner critic trying to tell me? And when do I need to hear that? And when don't I? And oftentimes we don't, as professionals, as adults that have been through enough of life to have done some work and kind of find out what we stand for, we don't actually need what the inner critic has to say. But instead of like repressing it or ignoring it, you can just change your relationship to it and say, I've got it covered. Thanks for caring.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. A friend of mine was talking about this in sort of different contexts, but similar, when she was doing inner child work.
Yep.
And, to have a phone call with, a father figure or somebody that you don't have a good relationship with, you can actually ask your inner child, like, do you want to sit this one out? Well, it's the same thing with that inner critic. It's like, okay, I'm about to do something big and maybe uncomfortable and intimidating. Hey, inner critic, I'm asking you to sit this one out. Like, I don't need you for this one. I've got it. I'm prepared. I'm walking into this without you needing to be a part of it. And that can be like a dialogue. It can be a conversation that you're having with whatever part of yourself is maybe programmed to limit you or stop you or keep you stuck.
Yeah. I mean, I'm often talking to people about having that dialogue. It doesn't need to be out loud. If that works for you and you don't judge yourself for it, like go for it, have at it. But if it's something that's just internal, is just like a check, it's really powerful. I mean, to go back to this notion of you being recognized as being inspirational, I would imagine that when you were young, there was a part of you that wanted to inspire other people. And I imagine when you were young, there was a part of you that maybe didn't know if that would ever be possible. You didn't know what you'd become as an adult. There's like so much uncertainty in that. And that's a type of conversation to bring in your inner child and say, like, look at how far we've come. Like, I'm proud of you. And you know what I mean? I'm proud of me. Like we did this together because you're a part of who I am. Yeah. That's, I had that experience recently, like earlier today. not in so many words, not in such plain English, but definitely a recognition of like, there was many years of my life where I was completely rudderless and lost, but had ambition, had drive, had a calling to something. But when you're rudderless, a calling can be agonizing, because you're like, I've got this thing inside of me that I got to get out, but I don't know where to put it and I don't know what to do with it. And when you find the alignment there in your life, oh my gosh, I live every day with deep gratitude about it, because I don't think it could get any better.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's in that rudderless place?
Of having something inside of them and not knowing like what direction to go in.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people that reads as not even knowing what that thing is inside of them, but just feeling this pull that there's some greater sense of fulfillment, or there's some more expression that wants to come out, or some idea that's being, stuck in the fog.
I mean, there's so many different avenues to get to it, and it works differently for different people. I think coaching is a powerful avenue. I think tapping into spirituality. I think creativity and art and just general expression, deep, meaningful conversations with people, journaling, and like getting it, you got to get it out of yourself at some point. Experimentation and talking to as many people as you can that do the thing that you think you might want to do. I mean, I worked in door-to-door sales. I was a commercial real estate agent. Documentary filmmaker. I mean, there were a lot of stops on the path, and I wouldn't even call them dead ends, but you run down a road and you're like, nope, this isn't the one for me. And you keep going, but you won't really find it unless you try those different roads and experiment.
Yeah. I think that's really, that was my experience of how I started my business too, is just full gung ho running down a path until I realized, oh, wait, that's not quite it. Okay, I'm going to full gung ho run down this one now and see what it is. But that willingness to explore something before you know that it's it. I think a lot of people get stopped in their tracks waiting to be sure. And it's much easier to be sure if you chase and try and like experiment and attack that one idea until it's exhausted, until you know that now I know that that's not it. But it takes some courage to gung-ho run down that path in the first place.
It does. I mean, I think we, generally speaking, live in a culture where at a very early age, people need to opt into things. It's like, if you're going to get into sports, my son is 8 and it's like, well, he's got to get into the right programs early. Otherwise, you can't opt in later. You're not going to be able to catch up. And that's daunting. I mean, that's what happens when you pick a major in college and you're like, you got to choose who I want to be before I know who I am.
Right.
And in the flip side, I think there's an aspect of our culture right now that is so overly positive that we shy away from any notion that there could be value in negative or what is not positive. Meaning, I believe you can learn just as much, if not more, by finding out what you don't like than what you do. Because then I'm not going to go back to that. That wasn't good for me. There's value in that. That helps you focus,
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives you so much more information to walk that path and see what parts of it were quite right and what parts of it were not quite right. Definitely.
Yes. Yeah. Like the power of reflecting on it too.
Yeah. Awesome. So to circle back to the work that you're doing with leaders and in those spaces, because you mentioned the old habits and patterns that hold them back. So I'm imagining people in like corporate positions or people in like bigger roles who are having things holding them back, but maybe they don't know it. So what are the ways that sort of appears? What are the sort of not symptoms, but what are the traits that you find in your clients when they're ready to get support from someone like you?
I'm sure there's more than kind of 2 buckets, but I'll put them in 2 buckets. There's the person that knows they're stuck, but they don't know why. So I keep trying to get out of this rut that I'm in, or I keep trying to do the thing I say I'm going to do, and yet I can't quite get there. My organization is calling for me to step up in this particular way, and I'm really resistant to doing it, and I don't know why. I think the other place is when people have no notion of what it is that they want, or even what they're doing, because they've been maybe just so focused on what's directly in front of them that they haven't actually slowed down enough to think about like, what matters to me. And with those clients, we start the conversation just by defining like, what does success look like to them? And I don't mean success defined by money. Maybe for some people, maybe that's really important. For others, it's less important. But like, what does a fulfilled life look like? How would you know if you were living it? And then you'll know, okay, what's missing in my life right now if I'm not? What's missing in my career that I'm not? So many people have reached burnout in organizations over the last 2 years. They're working as effectively as they did when we were in the office, but they're working more hours than ever before. And that's a metric that we overlook. The story is like, oh, people have been just as effective working from home. Well, they've gotten as much work done, but they've been working a lot harder. And when you get to a place of burnout, you start to question, like, what is this all for? And I think that's what is contributing to, I guess what some are calling the great resignation. But that's like a values realignment. That's what that is. When people resign, they're like, I'm not living in accordance with my values, or this role is not in accordance with my values. Or I don't know what my values are, but this doesn't feel right anymore. So those are kind of the two paths where I find, most of the leaders that I work with are in. And one is not better or worse than the other. They're just different starting places.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that was something I was aware of pretty early on during the global pandemic, was that a lot of people were suddenly at home having to look at something that they weren't willing to look at when they were, fully caught up in the normal rat race and day to day. Is now you're at home. Does this job actually serve you? Is this who you want to be in the world? And I think that great resignation is like obvious byproduct of that many people on the planet having to say, wait, is this really what I want? Do I want to go back and dedicate my whole life to this path now? Because what if I don't have to? What if it could be different? And
yeah. A theory that I have about this is that not going into the office, not having a commute, not having, lunch with your coworkers and colleagues and coffee has eliminated a lot of social comparison stress. Oh, so-and-so at the office just got a new car, so-and-so's got this new outfit, because we're just in these little boxes.
Yeah.
And not that doesn't still exist. It certainly does in social media, but you eliminate that and it creates space for us to fill with something else. And that's where these like internal things can start to emerge when we create the space.
I like
Unfortunately,
that.
it came from a pandemic, awful circumstance. There are silver linings.
Definitely. Yeah. And I love holding that view too. Lots of trauma, lots of grief, lots of discomfort, and lots of new awakenings and brilliant new paths and trajectories have been formed.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So you call yourself a chief empathy officer. Tell us what that means.
The basis of my work is around empathy and compassion, and specifically self-compassion. Like, I hold the fundamental belief that is the single most important ingredient in life and in leadership, is to be able to practice self-compassion. And I do mean practice. It's a daily practice, just like being spiritual. And in order to be truly empathetic for someone else, in order to be truly compassionate for someone else, we really need to be able to practice it for ourselves. Because if we don't, then we are not whole. And when we're not whole, we're not able to be in service of others to the best of our ability. And especially people that have leadership titles, they've come up in a culture, in a orientation where it's all about being in service of others. And I have a responsibility for the people. And yes, that's true. But if you're not doing the work for yourself as well, you will hit a wall at some point, because you're human.
Yeah.
And we all do. Like, this is a part of the shared human experience. And self-compassion to me is the on-ramp to start to recognize, oh, that's right, I'm human and I'm having a human experience, who is also working to be a leader, who's also working to be a partner or a spouse or a friend or whatever your role in life is. But you're still a human being, and we still experience trauma and loss and suffering and joy and happiness and all the whole tapestry of emotions. Like, that's what it is. And we've lost touch with that. Many leaders have lost touch with that. And my work is about bringing people back to that place, because it's from that place that you can be seen and see others. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we all want, is we just want to be seen, heard, and appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So for those people who are wondering, well, am I being self-compassionate, or like, where do I even start with that? What are some of your like cheat sheet tips to start looking at self-compassion and having more of it in your life?
Yeah. So probably over a decade ago, Dr. Kristen Neff wrote a book called Self-Compassion, and she's really the thought leader that, the kind of emerged this field of study that went beyond self-worth and self-efficacy and self-esteem, which were, very popular, in the recent past. And so I would recommend that to anybody. And it's the kind of book that you can go back and read again and again, because again, it's a practice. But for me, I find that there's one simple practice that I do on a regular basis that helps me. And it's one of recognizing whatever the stimulus is, or the situation, or whatever it is that is triggering an emotion in me. Typically, when it's an emotion that I don't necessarily want or is uncomfortable, is when I practice this most. And the truth be told, I should practice it more when I'm having positive emotions too, because it's just as informative. But that's room for me to grow. But in instances where I might be feeling, frustrated or disgust or irritated or impatient or irritable, whatever it might be, to understand what is this emotion and having clarity of what it is. And I speak about this in the terms of emotional fluency. So it's not just that I'm feeling sad or mad, like what flavor of sad or mad is it? Mm-hmm. And that fluency helps us understand what is the emotion. And then understand the emotion helps us understand what is the unmet need. I'm frustrated because I don't feel like I'm being heard in this conversation, and I have a need to be heard. I have a need to be seen. That information can help me be an advocate for myself and do something differently than what most people do, is either repress the emotion and it doesn't go away, mm-hmm. or they stew in the emotion and it just spins into another emotion, and exists in rumination. But it's when we name it,
comes out in a really uncomfortable and not healthy way.
That too.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, this all came to me from my own failings, as a practitioner in leadership development and coaching. And I was still doing all these things that weren't necessarily productive. But when we can recognize what our emotions are objectively, we can find out what the unmet need is, then we can choose how we want to respond and how we want to get that need met. And for me, it's like a constant check-in throughout the day.
Yeah.
And I do it silently, but you could ask yourself out loud if that's what somebody wants to do.
And sometimes it could lead to a really beautiful, connected conversation with somebody that you want to share it with. And I mean, I think the main thing is we are programmed to like react and respond and have an answer and show up and like be on the ball in this rat race of a world. And so it's counterintuitive to think that I could get more out of my life. I could get more out of this like business dynamic or relationship or situation if I slow down and actually check in with me first. But it is that slowing down that actually opens this doorway to so much more potential of what we can create, what we can be, how we can show up, who we can impact, influence, and support and connect with, and like the opportunities and possibilities that can come from that kind of self-awareness and self-compassion. Definitely.
I completely agree, Molly. And the reality is, this is not a practice that takes like 10 minutes at a time. It's a moment.
Yeah.
All they are is moments, and being aware of what's happening for me in this moment, and how do I want to choose to respond. That's, I think, the way to approach it. Otherwise, it can be overwhelming. I've had clients say, like, so do you want me to journal every time I'm feeling a strong emotion? Like, you could.
To start out with, that might be a good practice.
Yeah. Or it could just be, what am I feeling in this moment? And get curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you mentioned the word fluency too, because it is really a new language. I mean, a lot of us don't have emotional intelligence or these kinds of inquiries built into our system because they weren't taught to us by anyone at a young age. So this is like a language that we have to learn to become fluent in. And that can look a lot of different ways. When I was first learning about nonviolent communication and trying to like build some of these tools, I printed a little tiny cheat sheet of all the emotions that I could be feeling and actually put it in my wallet so that when a moment came up, I could open that and look at, okay, I'm triggered or something's up. Like, what is it? So I could learn to start naming it And I needed that little device to be like, okay, I have a tool, I have a process, I know what I'm doing. Here's the thing. If I can't find the word, I can maybe point to it on this list. And that was really helpful for me at the beginning to be able to start naming an emotion that maybe, like you said, what's the flavor of sadness or what's the flavor of anger, that I couldn't come up with the word in the moment. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Marshall Rosenberg's work, blew open the door on this. And, whether it's a list of emotions or there's the feelings wheel, which is a common thing that's used. Brene Brown's new book called Atlas of the Heart is, it's a taxonomy of what our emotions are. And it's brilliant. I mean, reading through it, like you can't help but have a greater understanding of, who you are by having a greater fluency of what are the emotions you experience, because that is what it is to be human, is to be emotional. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing.
Right. It's not. It's actually really normal.
Yeah. And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And to have an awareness of it and to be able to communicate it even just to yourself before maybe you're ready to communicate it to other people. The benefits of doing this kind of work are astounding. What are some of the things that you've noticed in your clients and in the world, in people that you've worked with, what changes when they start using these kinds of tools or when they start finding that self-compassion?
The most frequent thing that I hear from people, and have experienced it myself, is a weight is lifted. So much of burnout and the pressure that we experience and the rat race, as you put it, is this pressure that we put on ourselves. And yes, we may be in organizations where pressure is being put on us, but I would put my money behind the fact that people are putting more pressure on themselves than anyone else is putting on them. I'm sure there's outliers to that, but that's what I find to be most often the case. And these are type A hard drivers, and they're like, I got here because I was hard on myself. I can't stop now. You're asking me to be kind to myself. It's the fact that I've been whipping myself that is why I'm performing. Mm. And my response to that is like, that's also the reason why you're burnt out and you're miserable and you're not fulfilled and your relationships are not the way you want them to be and you're not sleeping and you're right. So when people can actually have that weight lifted, then they can experience the space. Again, they're just moments, but a moment can change a relationship. A moment can change a career. It can change a life if you allow yourself to be curious about it.
So much wisdom. This is a great episode. I hope you guys are taking notes. This is powerful stuff. I haven't even read that book by Brene Brown yet, Atlas of the Heart, you said?
I have it right here, Molly.
That's in your rainbow bookshelf, which I love. Awesome.
And it's
I'll be reading that soon.
It's different than all of her other books, but I can't speak highly enough of it, especially in the context of increasing our fluency around our emotions. She wrote the book on it. And I'm really glad she did, her and her team.
Yeah, I'll be reading that for sure. Thanks for that recommendation. So what are you most excited about coming up in your business or life?
God, there are so many things that I'm excited about, to be honest with you. Professionally, there is a balance and authenticity that I'm finding in my work right now that I knew I would find, but it just takes time. Again, as you're talking about kind of the winding road of being an entrepreneur, mm-hmm. It takes some time to kind of find out what's your place in all of this and how can you contribute. I don't look at any of this work as competitive. I look at it as collaborative, even if it's from afar. So how can I contribute to this body of knowledge and work that's being done? I think it's important. And so I'm excited about that. And personally, I'm going on a hike next month in Italy from Bologna to Florence.
Wow.
And it'll be a week without my computer and out in nature with friends and family. And I'm really looking forward to it.
That sounds amazing. Eat all the pasta.
Yeah. I mean, you walk every day. So like you gotta load up for the day ahead.
For a long walk. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Awesome. So I know people are listening and wanting to know more, probably wanting to follow you or see what you're up to. What's the best place for people to go and learn more?
You can find me on all social media at Massimo Backus. That's Massimo Backus. As far as I know, I'm the only one of those out there. So it should be easy to find. And my website is the same name, MassimoBackus.com.
Awesome. We will put that link in the show notes for all of you out there who want to check it out. Definitely go and follow Massimo. He's a brilliant mind and a powerful leader. I know you shared a lot of wisdom on this episode already, but are there any last words of wisdom you want to leave people with?
Be kind to yourself. Just be kind to yourself. It's important to be kind to others as well, but I think sometimes we overlook like what's the power of just being kind to ourselves.
Yeah, super important. That's a big one right now. Awesome. Thank you so much, Massimo, for being on the show, sharing
Thank
your
you,
magic
Molly.
with us. Yeah, and thank you everyone out there for listening. Don't forget to keep asking big questions and taking bold action because you are here for a reason. We'll see you next week.